truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Monday, October 7th, 2024, the 1356th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening through a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month. And in doing so, you'll get the ad-free experience. You'll be able to participate in the conversation over on Substack. And you'll be invited to the interactive live stream every Wednesday afternoon. And if you can't or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the free version on Substack, a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin, and you feel better about precious metals. I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company, and that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. All right, so we are culturally obligated to start out with the most important news of the day, maybe the most important news of all time, according to our mainstream media. It has been 1 year since the Paragliding Go-Kart Incident. And so if we don't start out with that story, we're all anti-Semitic. Me for starting out with something else, and all of you for listening to it. CNN's website has been providing live updates of the 1 year anniversary of Israel's 9/11. We were told that was the proper comparison to make, and maybe that's because in both of those incidents, there was more than ample warning that something like that might happen, and then it still happened anyway. It's amazing that paragliding go-karts were able to gently float over the most secured border in all of human history, despite having a year's advance warning. And everything that has happened in the Middle East since then has been justified by the paragliding go-kart incident. CNN's front page highlighted a CNN podcast called One Thing with Nick Robertson. And the headline there was, How October 7th Paved the Way for a Widening War. That's right, a kinetic World War III in the Middle East was started with the paragliding go-kart incident. Or perhaps more accurately, it was started because people believed in the paragliding go-kart incident. And to be clear, I'm not making the case that nothing tragic has occurred in Israel or Gaza or Lebanon or anywhere else. But if the inciting event for a World War III narrative is something so ridiculous that it should never be believed by anyone, it makes sense to look at everything related to that incident with an extremely skeptical eye. But people don't want to do that. They think it's insensitive to victims of tragedies, or it's somehow anti-Jewish to question what we're being shown and told by global regime propaganda and military intelligence organizations. And I get why this sort of thing bothers people. They think, can't we just ignore those details? Can't we just ignore the psyop elements and focus on the fact that there is a human tragedy here? There are real victims here. And unfortunately, no, we can't. To the extent there's a real tragedy and real victims in any of these events, I'm not just talking about the paragliding go-kart incident, we can focus a little on those people. We can pray for them. We can help if we're able to help. We can try to learn what actually happened so that we know our methods of helping are actually effective and wanted and welcomed. But we can't just forget the rest of it, because the people playing on your sensitivities and telling you to focus on the tragic human elements are the people creating these crises, because the crisis creates an opportunity and the opportunity can then be exploited. And that's what happens when we accept the truth of the underlying narrative and focus instead on the tragic human elements. The fact that the television has traumatized people into believing that they were vicariously also victims of this tragedy, to the point where they go emotionally enact their victimhood in front of the world to show how much they care too, does not make them real victims. And it doesn't mean that the feelings they're expressing are somehow qualitatively different than the feelings we're expressing. If I went to a movie theater to see Titanic with one of the people on TV today publicly emoting about the paragliding go-kart incident, if that person was bawling his or her eyes out at the end of Titanic and wailing so the entire theater could hear the cries, that wouldn't make that person a better person than me, because we would all recognize that as fictional. And yet in this situation, where we are being shown and told about something that basically could not possibly have happened by the same people who told us Joe Biden received 81 million real lawful American votes and told us to wear 2 masks in our car, we assume there's no way they could be lying about anything this important. The people who told us we were telling the big lie and threatening our democracy for questioning election results, and that we were killing people's grandmothers for not masking up, tell us that we're Nazis if we question the paragliding go-kart incident or anything that came after, and refuse to give moral license to Israel's indiscriminate killing of anyone and everyone for as long as they want as a result of that incident. If you want to know how the psyop can persist for decades or centuries or millennia, this is how. All you have to do is create a society where people care more about looking like good and honest people than actually being good and honest people. Because at that point, you can get them to do virtually anything just by telling them, you're going to look like a bad person if you don't say this or do this or wear this or buy this or believe this or support this. I remember it in Hollywood in 2020, the day that everyone had to post the black square on Instagram. A few days after the George Floyd incident, right as the summer of love was just beginning, agents and managers and PR people telling their clients to post that black square on Instagram because if they didn't, they were going to look racist. I don't like that the world is this way. I wish it wasn't this way, but it is this way. And it will remain this way until people care more about being good and honest than looking good and honest, because people who are actually focused on being good and honest are a lot less easy to exploit. I don't think we were built with the capacity to know about or care about people 10,000 miles away that we will never know and never meet, to then assume that it is our moral obligation to commit ourselves to their cause as described by people on television who lie to us all the time is an evil and demoralizing trick. It is a convenient way to get good people to support absolute evil. And until we are able to stand up for ourselves and withhold our participation from that, we will continue to be exploited. We can care generally for the victims of real tragedies all across the world, most of which we never know about and never hear about. It's not like the regime's propaganda media is focused on communicating all the world's tragedies to us so that we can somehow help. They are telling us about certain tragedies, often ones they've caused, or at minimum failed to prevent, that they intend to exploit through our belief and the behaviors that follow that belief. We are being encouraged to go to war on behalf of Israel. We're not being encouraged to do anything on behalf of our own countrymen in Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee and other areas that were affected. And there's another freak storm just building up right now in the Gulf, just off the eastern coast of Mexico. It's just been hovering there for 2 or 3 days, but then it's going to launch itself at hyperspeed toward Florida's west coast, and it could be a Category 6 hurricane now. That's what they're saying. Hurricane Milton. I wonder if it's named after John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost. Here's how Perplexity summarizes Paradise Lost. The narrative begins after Satan and his fellow rebellious angels have been cast out of heaven and into hell. In Pandemonium, the capital of hell, Satan rallies his forces and volunteers to corrupt God's new creation, earth, and its inhabitants, Adam and Eve. Satan journeys through chaos to reach earth and enters the Garden of Eden. There he overhears Adam and Eve discussing God's commandment not to eat from the tree of knowledge. Satan takes the form of a serpent and tempts Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. She then convinces Adam to do the same. After their disobedience, God sends his son to judge Adam and Eve. They are punished and expelled from paradise. The son also punishes Satan, condemning him and his followers to crawl as serpents. This whole affair has become rather biblical, has it not? CNN's front page does not mention Hurricane Helene until a headline about 80-90% of the way down the front page. Fact check, Trump's 6 days of lies about Hurricane Helene response debunked. Then another small headline, The Power of Water, how Helene devastated Western North Carolina and left communities in ruin. And as Hurricane Milton threatens the U.S., Helene could cost property owners more than $47 billion. That stuff is happening right now, and they're highlighting the Paragliding Go-Kart Incident from a year ago, and on the same front page advertising a podcast about how October 7th has paved the way for a widening war. Am I the one being insensitive to real victims, or is CNN? The public conversation on weather manipulation has begun in earnest. Where is CNN on that? Oh, right. They're busy fact-checking Marjorie Taylor Greene, who actually came out and said, yes, they can control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done. She said that on X, formerly Twitter. And the former comedian Sarah Silverman said, hi, you're an anti-Semitic pig. And that's crazy, isn't it? I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene said, yes, they can control the weather. I think she meant the government, didn't she? I mean, she must have meant the government. She didn't say Jews. Why is Sarah Silverman assuming that Marjorie Taylor Greene meant or said Jews when she didn't. We were told MTG was a conspiracy theorist for talking about Jewish space lasers. And of course, Israel legitimately has directed energy weapons protecting Israel. They're called the Iron Beam. You can just look them up. We just sent them funding for that a few months back in a smaller version of Mike Johnson's package. This was the, of course, Jewish version. Sorry, Jewish friends, I just could not bypass that opportunity. The mainstream media is prioritizing year-old Jewish tragedy porn and future disaster porn and totally ignoring the suffering of actual Americans who may very well have just been attacked in an act of war. Their priority is to diminish any discussion around that event, fact-check whoever engages in wrong speak about it, and then shift to horrifying tales of woe that just so happen to help them sell their agenda, to get people to behave in a way they want them to behave. You didn't believe in climate change before? Well, how much do we need to change your climate before you relent and give us back our power? That's what they're saying. Do you remember what this government did? Do you remember what the Uniparty did in the aftermath of our 9/11? Multiple wars, the Patriot Act, the TSA? We spent 20 years in Afghanistan protecting an opium supply for Big Pharma, justified by 9/11 and allowed to continue based on people's belief in the central narrative and the fear that was stoked in them over terrorism. Many people have reached this understanding. That understanding is not insensitive to people who died in the Twin Towers, two of whom I actually knew. It should not and cannot take us 20 years to get to the point where we are able to talk about these things rationally. Because in that 20 years, while we remain in the past on an informational timeline, the regime moves forward. Every year following 9/11 was never forget, never forget, never forget. They could drum up that sentiment anytime they wanted. Hell, George Bush and Dick Cheney ran for re-election with their surrogates disseminating campaign messaging about how George W. Bush had protected America in the aftermath of 9/11, as if he just got a mulligan. It's like their campaign slogan was, "Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?" The media is not trying to help us figure out our world so that we can together attempt to heal it. What they are doing today is not honoring the human tragedy and the victims of whatever real tragedy occurred on 10/7/23. They are using that to sell endless war, and they will continue to do that successfully until people can put their virtue signaling and their emotional hostage taking aside and tell the truth about what is going on here. In the past 4 years, we were lied to about a pandemic, lied to about our election results, lied to about a vaccine, lied to about an insurrection against our country, lied to about an invasion against our country, lied to about censorship, lied to about terrorism, lied to about our military. We've even been lied to about another war. And yet, people who know and recognize all of that will still say, yeah, but they're not lying about this one. And if you say they are, you're anti-Semitic. We as humans are frail, we are fallen, we are weak, we make mistakes, we can be exploited, our instincts will fail us, our desires will lead us to bad places. We cannot and should not give them more opportunities to exploit us based on our inability to turn off the TV or at least emotionally detach from what is playing on it. And it doesn't matter, by the way, through which of your screens you are viewing the television. Why are they treating Israel's 9/11 the same way they're treating our 9/11? Why don't they treat other tragedies this way? Why don't they treat other countries' tragedies this way? The answer is because those tragedies aren't useful in them pushing their agenda. It's not worth their time to focus on those tragedies because those tragedies won't allow them to exploit you. I joke about this stuff and mock these stories because humor naturally breaks through the pretense and the cultural pressure over how we're supposed to act and react to stories like this. Don't joke about it if that makes you uncomfortable, but we do need to opt out. Now, as this is the 1-year anniversary of Israel's 9/11, 10/7 is also the anniversary of some other interesting events. In fact, in 2016, on October 7th, WikiLeaks released the John Podesta emails, and to cover that up, the Donald Trump Access Hollywood tape was also released. Why isn't CNN celebrating the anniversary of WikiLeaks releasing Podesta's emails? I guess we'll never know the answers to these kinds of questions. Now, over the weekend, Donald Trump returned to Butler, Pennsylvania to finish the rally he started on July 13th of this year that was cut short a few minutes later with Trump Assassination Event #1. As usual, there were people camped out overnight. There was video of long lines early in the morning on Saturday. From overhead shots, it looked like the crowd there was about the size of the Coachella Music Festival. Tens of thousands of people, one of the biggest rallies he's had. Trump said 100,000 people attended. It looked like he could be right. We're told by our bettors that it was only in the low 20,000s, which is frankly preposterous. The people who are telling us that a fake vice president is running a real campaign in a real election to become real president after supplanting the real fake president and simply assuming the nomination and then touting the sizes of her crowds that are just the same people flown around the country to attend her events are questioning Trump's crowd size. So Trump returns to the scene of Assassination Event #1, and here's how he kicked things off.
Thank you. A very big thank you to Pennsylvania. We love Pennsylvania. And as I was saying,
Donald Trump, always the showman, picking up right where he left off. He turns his head. He points out the chart. He says, "This arrow shows the moment I left office." Well, he's been saying that for months now. That arrow points to April 2020. What does it all mean? Maybe one day we'll find out. The family of Corey Compertor attended the rally as Trump's guests. Corey was the fireman who was struck with the stray bullet during Assassination Event #1. Trump called for a moment of silence in his honor. A bell tolled 4 times. Once the moment of silence ended, a fantastic opera singer named Christopher Macchio came out and performed Ave Maria. The speech continued, and Trump noticed someone in the crowd who seemed to have fallen ill or something. It's hard to tell what happened, but he paused his speech, calling for doctors to come tend to the person. And during that pause, which extended for a couple of minutes, the crowd broke out spontaneously in the national anthem. Here it is. You might even be able to hear Trump singing along. You can hear the USA chants. Not long after, they broke out into a God bless Trump chant. Now, before the rally, it was announced that Elon Musk would be attending the event, and he did. He was wearing a MAGA hat, but not the red one, a black one with dark gray lettering, and a T-shirt that read Occupy Mars under a black blazer. Here's Donald Trump bringing him up on stage.
He's a great gentleman. He's done such an unbelievable job for North Carolina, for Georgia, for Alabama, for Florida, for Tennessee. His name is Elon Musk. He saved free speech. He created so many different great things. Where is he? Come on up here, Elon. He created the first major American car company in generations, and his rocket company is the only reason we can now send American astronauts into space. Come here. Take over, Elon. Yes, take over.
Hi, everyone. As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA. Well, first of all, I want to say what an honor it is to be here. And, you know, the true test of someone's character is how they behave under fire. And we had one president who couldn't climb a flight of stairs, and another who was fist pumping after getting shot. Fight, fight, fight! Blood coming down the face. Now, America is the home of the brave. And there's no truer test than courage under fire. So who do you want representing America? Yeah, absolutely. And I think this election, I think it's the most important election of our lifetime. This is no ordinary election. The other side wants to take away your freedom of speech. They want to take away your right to bear arms. They want to take away your right to vote effectively.
And Elon goes on to discuss some of the issues around voting in our elections, the fact that we have mass immigration and a push to allow illegal aliens to vote. People are understanding that illegal aliens have had votes cast in their name for a long time now. And his prescription was for people to go out and register to vote and make sure they vote and bring everyone else they know to register to vote and make sure they vote. And I guess we're all going to have to continue going on with this story about how factions come to power in our country for at least another 4 weeks. And as always, I am open to the argument that Elon Musk is catering to a mainstream audience of standard issue villagers who are still clueless about the role of elections in our country and the validity of those elections. He says it's the most important election of our lifetime, something that Donald Trump has said, something that Trump said in 2020 and in 2016, and something that virtually every person running for president in our modern era has said. And to that, he adds the idea that if Trump doesn't win this election, this will be our last election. There's a chance it'll be our last election no matter what. It's also a fake election that might be canceled. So it's possible that our last election has already passed. But I posted this over the weekend. Saying if Donald Trump does not win, this will be the last election is a threat to the regime, not to us. They own elections worldwide, not us. Elections are their means of control, not ours. If Donald Trump is not declared the winner, no one will ever believe in elections again. It is already too big to rig, narratively speaking, and it has been for a while. One of their last pillars is crumbling. They are in a bind. They are in a catch-22. If your goal is the awakening, if your goal is to have legitimate elections in the United States of America, it is necessary to first accomplish the task of achieving a critical mass consensus of people who understand that our elections as they stand are completely and totally rigged, totally unconstitutional, held lawlessly, and utterly incapable of creating legitimacy. It is a necessary step along the way. You can learn it and accept it now, or you can get the hose again. And a lot of people, of course, are begging for the hose at this point. 4 weeks and a day from now, people aren't going to think the race is closer. They're going to think Donald Trump is ahead by a whole lot more than they think now. And at that point, Kamala Harris being declared a winner, especially a big winner, whether it's in the Electoral College or the popular vote, that's going to tell absolutely everyone that our elections are fake. The idea that we would just continue on having elections while it is widely publicly acknowledged that our elections are fake seems a little far-fetched as far as I'm concerned. But maybe that's what we're dealing with right now. Hopefully the experience of getting the hose again one more time will be enough, but maybe it's just our fate to do this forever. What would it mean to show the rest of the world that America's elections are obviously fake, and now everyone knows it? We went through that International Crisis Group report on Venezuela from 2020. I continually bring this thing up. The chairman of the International Crisis Group is Mark Malloch Brown. George Soros and his son are trustees of the organization. They partner with transnational banks and energy companies. That report was a strategy on how to remove Nicolas Maduro as president of Venezuela and recommendations on how they could apply leverage and money and incentivize and punish in order to schedule earlier elections that they could then rig in order to remove Maduro from power. Elections are a regime psyop. They schedule them. They build all of this anticipation in the most divisive ways possible so that everyone who participates in the election wants their particular brand of the uniparty product to win. They spend their precious time, money, mental energy, emotional energy, believing that their very lives depend on the outcomes of fake elections. And in doing so, they hand over their power and consent to the regime and say, "Thank you for allowing me to participate. However this turns out, I accept it as my choice." And I think it would be rather easy for people to see this, except for the fact that so many people are consumed with the idea that elections must be won in order for our society to improve. Everything then becomes dependent on the psyop. And rather than recognizing the aspects that are a psyop meant to exploit us, which is what causes the psyops to fail, we double down even harder. We say this is the most important one of these psyops we've ever participated in. This will be the last one we have to participate in as a psyop, because once we win this one, then we'll finally have the power we need to make it not a psyop anymore. At that point, elections will become legitimate. Who's going to make them legitimate? All the people who were declared winners of the fake elections. Now, you might remember this little segment from Elon Musk's interview with Tucker Carlson in April of 2023.
Faith, the most ironic outcome is the most likely, it seems.
I'm stealing that. That's good.
That's actually a friend of mine, Jonah, came up with that one. I actually have a slight variant on that, which is the most entertaining outcome is the most likely. But that's entertaining as viewed from a third-party viewer.
Right.
Like, so if we're like an alien
from
TV
on
show.
High, yes.
Yeah. Like you could go see a movie about World War I, and they're being blown to bits and gassed and everything in the trenches, and it's like you're eating popcorn and having a soda, you know, it's fine. Not so great for the people in the movie.
True.
But that's my variant on this sort of Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is most likely. Jonah's variant, which is irony, and then my variant, which is the most entertaining as seen by a third-party audience, which seems to be mostly true.
And I agree, it does seem mostly true. But Elon is recognizing, of course, the fact that a lot of this is planned and scripted. Whatever the two sides are in this amorphous war that we see playing out before us every day, often through our screens, they're not playing on the same timeline we are. Their game doesn't change if a lot of us show up on November 5th or only very few of us. Things are playing out on a much higher level. And Elon Musk, of course, as the leading contractor at the Department of Defense, one of the world's most powerful and wealthy men, at least among those who are not behind the curtain, he is aware that elements of this are show. In fact, he's participating in the show. And people think about this in different ways. Some think it's good, some think it's bad. But the point is, he's participating in the show. In my estimation, he's taunting the enemy. But then again, the enemy believes that we shouldn't have elections either. Yuval Noah Harari thinks we should be governed by AI. He says that it's okay if we have elections, if people want to go out and express themselves, but they would be participating in a farce. And it's easy to see that and think that about some future people who certainly aren't us, but we're actually doing the same thing. And again, none of this has to bum you out. If we're focused on the awakening, if we're focused on having legitimate elections, all we're doing is having a discussion about the illegitimacy of our elections and how the elements that are only a psychological operation are used to manipulate us. When we understand these things, they can no longer be used to manipulate us. That's the point. The Trump rally on Saturday was not only a positive event, it was basically like a celebration. Trump honored and celebrated the life of Corey Compertor. He cracked jokes about Assassination Event #1, and he made the case to the American public with a lot of help from some friends and some family. And yes, most particularly Elon Musk. He bounded up on stage and began jumping around. There are some pretty spectacular pictures of Elon Musk with his hands raised above his head, jumping around like a little kid. Pure enthusiasm and exuberance. And I think it's at least possible that that's very real. Elon Musk used to seem pretty clearly aligned with the other side, with the technocracy, with the transhumanists, with the globalists, with the climate change people, the whole agenda. And it also seems like maybe he got out. And if he got out, he certainly has good reason to celebrate. Regardless, I saw that happening and I saw the pictures that emerged afterward, and I thought about all of the people I used to know in Hollywood, rabid Trump haters who absolutely worshipped Elon Musk 5 and 10 years ago. And I imagine what they must have been thinking, seeing Elon Musk grinning, jumping up and down for joy at a Donald Trump rally, wearing a MAGA hat, and now regularly and openly mocking the concepts of outer space, by the way. Elon is always promising to take us to Mars, occupy Mars right on his shirt. He even promised to send Nicolas Maduro to Mars. And Donald Trump is suggesting we can get there as well.
We will lead the world in space exploration. Thank you, Elon. We will lead the world in military, and we will reach Mars before the end of my term. Elon promised me he was going to do that. I don't know. Can you do that? Stand up. Can we do that? He wants to reach. I think he's going to do it. JD, work on him. Work on him. Work on him. JD is working on Elon. Now, he told me that we're going to win, and he's going to reach Mars by the end of our term, which is a big thing. Before China, before anybody, right? And my money's on that guy right there.
Donald Trump is saying Elon Musk is going to take us to Mars before the end of his term. Which term? This term? The next term? Within 4 years and 3 months, we are to believe that Elon Musk is going to take us to Mars, the planet? Does anyone believe that? Is there any reason to believe that? Is there any reason to believe that's possible? Of course, the answer is no to all of those. So either Donald Trump is up there just saying things and participating in the show, or he's talking about something else. My suspicion is that maybe he's referring to the Military Auxiliary Radio System, which was a program created in November of 1925. It was a DoD program managed by the Army and the Space Force, a civilian auxiliary consisting of licensed radio operators interested in assisting the military with their communications. And it's funny because Starlink signal goes on radio waves. Elon is a defense contractor, and Starlink is now accessible to civilians. In fact, it sounds like Elon is on the verge of making it possible for people's cell phones to connect to Starlink and send messages to one another without any other middleman. That is not new as a goal. I think it was probably 2 years ago when T-Mobile began marketing their Apple iPhones and the ability for those phones at some point in the future to connect directly to Starlink. I can certainly imagine Elon getting us to that version of Mars by the end of this Trump term. But we're not just a few years away from packing up and moving humanity to Mars. Now, regardless, Elon Musk being up there at a Trump rally is just shattering to all of the wannabe elite standard issue villagers out there everywhere. All the people who were so into climate change for the last decade. They loved Elon Musk until about 2 years ago. He was their hero until about 2 years ago. But now he's not only causing them problems, he is fully on the other side. He has one of the loudest megaphones in the world at his disposal. And I don't just mean because he's the quote unquote owner of Twitter. I mean because he genuinely has an influential voice. People know he's smart. They listen to him. He says interesting things. He's funny. He's cool. He's the sort of person that people tend to respect. And to be clear, I'm not arguing that you should. You should feel however you like about him. I think it's smart to be cautious about him, just like it is to be cautious about everyone else, up to and including Donald Trump. This is only to point out that there are sensible reasons why so many people pay attention to the things Elon Musk says. And of course, the other side knows that. Think about all these major psyops that have been run online over the last 5 or 10 years. They're all coordinated efforts on social media featuring big celebrities and influencers in order to create the correct consensus position. Let everyone know that's the position the good people, the talented people, the cool people, the people you want to be like, that's what they believe. And anything that is not that position is supported only by the sorts of people you would never want to be like. That is now being used against them, and very effectively. And they can't cancel Elon. First off, because he's too popular, he's too cool, and they've already tried so many times, but also because they can't take X, formerly Twitter, away from him, at least unless there's some other surprise still waiting, and there may well be. Despite what Donald Trump says about Elon's efforts toward free speech, there is not free speech on Twitter. If people want to claim it's better than it was, that's fine, but it's not free speech. It is a censored platform. So he hasn't gotten the job done. He hired Linda Yaccarino. It's unclear exactly how much power she has. Maybe Elon Musk will get censored and banned off his own platform. That would be hilarious. He did say the most entertaining outcome when viewed from a third party is most likely. And I've got to say, watching Elon get censored from X, formerly Twitter, and then having the name of the platform changed back to Twitter, that would be highly entertaining. But they can't cancel him, and they can't silence him, and they can't stop other people from hearing from him because those people want to hear from him and would even follow him to another platform if he had to move. So they can't stop him. And what he's doing is reversing the entire social incentive and punishment structure around supporting Trump. I'm not suggesting he started that effort by any means. That effort's been ongoing since 2015, but he's kind of putting one of the final nails in the coffin. It might be easy to make Trump and MAGA the targets of the hate movement. It's not as easy to make Elon Musk the target of the hate movement. But hey, let's spend a couple minutes listening to some commies try. This is Brian Stelter, who went away for a while to do a podcast and not be on CNN anymore. Well, no one cared about his podcast, and now he's back on CNN.
He is an example of what happens, I think, when he spends a lot of time online looking at his own social media feed. I would argue he's been radicalized, and he is obviously now an outspoken Trump supporter. But it looked like he had a lot of fun yesterday. Got to give him credit for that.
Yeah.
You got that? Elon Musk has been radicalized. He's at least ostensibly fighting for free speech. His companies are building the world-changing technology of the future that people like Brian Stelter used to love. He's still doing it. He's smart. He's funny. He looks like he's having a blast. He is literally jumping for joy. And he's been radicalized. Are we sure it's not the people with the yellow and blue flags hanging outside their house after 2.5 years of supporting Ukrainian Nazis who've been radicalized? In his speech on Saturday, Elon Musk said he was now dark MAGA, and of course he had the black MAGA hat on. Now, this isn't a new concept, though many people are treating it like it is one. Dark MAGA memes have been around for a while. It's always Trump with the activated laser eyes. The aesthetic kind of revolves around abandoning the pretense and going hard. And you might remember that the response to that was Dark Brandon, Joe Biden's alter ego with his aviator glasses, the framing of Biden as take no prisoners and ruthlessly efficient, the terrifyingly competent defender of America from those MAGA extremists. Well, Elon already had a little bit of that dark MAGA aesthetic to him because he's a fairly adept troll online. He says a lot of things the regime doesn't want out there, and he continues to rub their noses in it. Well, Brian Stelter came back for another appearance on CNN to discuss exactly that.
The phrase dark MAGA is interesting, and people might not be familiar with it. This is a meme, an online idea that has taken root over a number of years. Think about the Batman movie, The Dark Knight, the dystopian view of Gotham. When you hear the idea of dark MAGA, it's referring to this idea of an unleashed, unhinged version of Trump, a second Trump administration with no limits on its power. The idea of Trump saying, I'm your retribution, a more authoritarian version of Trumpism. That's the idea that drives dark MAGA. Even though some of the memes, some of the jokes might be sarcastic or edgy, there's a very real idea behind the idea of dark MAGA. So when you hear someone like Elon Musk say he's entirely on board, even with the more authoritarian impulses of Trump, that says something. That says that he's been radicalized over the years in his politics. Musk is also using his platform X to drive support to Trump. I noticed when I logged in yesterday during the Trump rally was always at the top of my feed. It almost felt as if he was forcing it up algorithmically to make sure everybody was watching the rally. So we're going to see that kind of support from Musk, him trying to tip the scales in Trump's favor. And I just think we should take a moment to talk about what he said at the end there, that this will be the last election if Trump does not win. That kind of rhetoric, right? And we do hear some of that from the left as well. That kind of rhetoric is going to make it very hard for all of us to be Americans, to be neighbors next year, right? We're going to have elections in the future. We're going to have elections after this year. We all have to find a way to live together in 2025 and beyond. But the rhetoric from someone like Musk saying this will be the last election, it's going to have dangerous consequences, I fear.
So Brian Stelter explains dark MAGA, and he explains Elon Musk going over to the dark side. And this is so dangerous, not because of this new dangerous radicalized ideology that Elon Musk has assumed, but because he's manipulating his platform to help Donald Trump. Now, does Brian Stelter have any evidence of that? Or is this just a baseless claim? Is this a conspiracy theory? And if Stelter can clarify that, why wasn't that a problem when other platforms were actually manipulating their content to benefit whoever opposed Donald Trump and his supporters and any element of the ideology? It's only a problem now. Brian Stelter is worried that we can't be Americans next year. Well, who can't? You, Brian? Are you planning on fleeing the country? What do you think is going to happen? We can't live together as neighbors? You just spent the last 4 years pretending that all of us were extremists and terrorists, calling us science deniers and vaccine deniers and conspiracy theorists. And if you've been listening to this show for a little while, you might remember back in May, I did an episode talking about an article that Brian Stelter wrote for The New Republic, that old school communist rag. They did a series called The Rise of American Fascism, featuring a cover image of Donald Trump as Hitler and describing the various ways that Donald Trump would be Hitler in his next term. Brian Stelter's article in particular was called Revenge and Freedom from Fact on the Media in a Fascist America. And he goes through this imagined future story where he paints a picture of MAGA extremists who have fallen to mis and disinformation, going after American journalists who are just trying to do their jobs as perfectly as they can and tell America what's actually happening. You know, like they do when they're calling Donald Trump Hitler. Donald Trump allows friendly media all the access they want, and people like Brian Stelter are basically hunted. Here is a paragraph from that article. Fox and Newsmax are allowed on the White House grounds, so officials can claim that, quote unquote, real news is still represented. Fox says it will provide the other networks with live video of all presidential events and remarks. While workers revert the former press briefing room to the indoor pool it was decades ago, Trump rewards Fox with interviews and promotions, at one point doubling the Murdoch family's market cap in a matter of weeks. And even the hosts who are most tempted to dissent are kept in check by the sudden windfall. And they know that for the MAGA faithful, Newsmax is always one remote click away. They learned that the hard way in 2020. So they toe the line, touting specious rumors about enemies within, about writers feeding quote-unquote resistance tips to foreign governments, about liberal editors doctoring photos of Trump to make him look even older than he really is, about treasonous reporters aiding the protesters on Inauguration Day. And then this. Remember when they tried to kill Trump? Becomes a rallying cry on the right, even though it didn't happen. Brian Stelter, always many steps ahead of the game. Why would he ever think his neighbors might have a problem with him? Why would he worry about fleeing the country? Needless to say, people of that mindset and ideology are not handling the newfound Elon Musk-Donald Trump alliance very well. And it's funny because there was a picture that actually came out after the rally of Donald Trump and Elon Musk just kind of hanging out by themselves in a production tent long after the event had ended. Now, along the lines of what Stelter was talking about, I want to go back to an earlier moment in the speech.
There's an enemy from within, and there's an outside enemy. And if you're smart, the outside enemy is not going to be a problem. Russia, China, North Korea. We're not going to have a problem if you have a smart president. If you have not such a smart president, then it's a problem. But we have an enemy from within, which I think is much more dangerous than the outside enemy. We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in the history of our country. We can make these the 4 greatest years. We'll turn it around so fast that your head will spin.
Morning Joe and Morning Mika tried to repaint that as Donald Trump preparing for civil war. They were angry that there was any focus on the assassination events, upset that Donald Trump would ever say that Democrats were trying to kill him, or that there's an enemy within here in the United States that poses a far bigger problem than Russia or China or North Korea, all of these countries we hear about around the world, places we will never visit, but places from which we're told all our threats emanate. Not only do these people in the mainstream deny the existence of those threats, they claim that any talk of those threats actually represents a threat of violence on our part or a desire for civil war. These are the people who lie about everything and threaten us if we are ever so bold as to dissent. They coerced people into injecting themselves with a toxic experimental substance that couldn't protect them from a disease that couldn't kill them. They said Joe Biden received 81 million real lawful American votes. They lie us into war after war after war. They lie us into racial division in search of race war. They censor us. They want to disarm us. Their explicitly stated agenda calls for the elimination of our constitutional rights and our basic human rights. But Trump is the real threat for calling it out. Let's return to Trump for one more clip.
At the beginning of this journey, I've been on a mission to rescue our nation from a failed and corrupt political establishment and corrupt people, frankly. They are the most corrupt people. That's the most corrupt group I've ever seen, ever. Nobody's ever seen a group like that. And to give you back the country you believe in, the country that you were born in, and the country that you deserve. And in that mission, I will never quit, I will never bend, I will never break, and I will never yield. I'm like these guys over here from Texas. And like I really believe all of us, we say, not even in the face of death itself, I will not. This is so important what we're doing. We're saving our country. This country is in big trouble. We're a failing nation. We are a failing nation. We're a nation in decline. We're a nation in distress. And we're going to get it fixed very quickly. But you know what? If we have to go with another 4 years of these people, and she's worse than Biden. in my opinion. First of all, I think Biden is actually far more intelligent, if you can believe that. Can you believe? I think he's more intelligent than she is. Ay, ay, ay. But I'm putting everything on the line to fight for you, and we're going to fight for you, and we're all going to win together. It's going to be the greatest win in the history of our country. I believe that. I believe it. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm only asking you to do one thing. We don't even need your money. Keep your money. Just go out and vote. Get everybody involved.
He asks pretty directly, do we need to do another 4 years of these people? Kamala Harris is even worse than Joe Biden. Do we really need to see 4 years of this before people come to their senses and opt out? Let's hope not, but people are asking for the hose again. Trump says we must vote. In fact, it's all he's ever asked for. But I think yesterday he more accurately described what that means. This is from Trump's speech in Juneau, Wisconsin.
We need, and I hate to use this word because they should have never done it with respect to COVID. They should have never done it. But for this, we need a mandate. They shouldn't have done it with COVID. Everybody that did it should be ashamed of themselves, what they did. But we need a mandate in the vote, and we're going to get it.
So Trump says what he needs is a mandate. Well, what's a mandate? Merriam-Webster defines mandate as an authorization to act given to a representative. Wikipedia says in representative democracies, a mandate is perceived legitimacy to rule through popular support. Essentially, it is the perception of legitimacy as conveyed and understood to have been conveyed by the people. It is a public consensus and permission structure for Donald Trump in his position as president to enact the agenda he has described. And the truth is that he has that already. To the extent that our vote expresses anything at all, it was expressed in the vote in 2020. Donald Trump was president. He had the information. He knows who had the mandate. It is expressed in public sentiment, though now people are actually understanding how much of the public agrees with that position. And of course, with the level of information they have, they already know which candidate among these two the American people want. The mandate is there. It's just whether or not the perception of that mandate is there and to what degree. And that's what fake elections are for. That is why they are psychological operations, because fake elections imply the mandate of the people, that popular consensus, that conveyed consent from the governed, that the person declared the winner is then allowed to implement the agenda. The Hill covered that Trump statement today and attempted to refute the idea that Trump could possibly achieve that agenda. Because it's a close race, and even if he wins, he can't guarantee to have the House or the Senate. And if the people don't vote for Republicans in the House and Senate too, well, that means that Donald Trump actually doesn't have a mandate. And of course, all of that assumes that our elections are free and fair, safe and secure, and the reported results reflect the will and intent of the American people. But they don't. California Representative Adam Schiff, who is actually running for Senate in California in this year's fake election, went on Meet the Press yesterday to be interviewed by new host Kristen Welker. Schiff told her, if it is close, if Donald Trump loses again, as I expect he will contest it. He has more reason to contest it than he did before, not because of any flaw in the election, but because Donald Trump believes, and perhaps with reason, that if he doesn't succeed at the ballot box, he may be going to jail. So he's going to challenge the results. Welker then asked him about these comments from Joe Biden on Friday. This was the fake president's first appearance in the White House press briefing room. And we just have to assume, for really no reason at all, that this is the real White House and not the fake White House across the street in the executive office building, and not the other fake White House just down the street that's actually a museum. But here's the fake president, Joe Biden.
The election is a month away. One, I'd like to know how you're feeling about how this election is going. And then also, do you have confidence that it will be a free and fair election and that it will be peaceful?
Two separate questions.
Very much.
I'm confident it'll be free and fair. I don't know whether it'll be peaceful. The things that Trump has said and the things that he said last time out when he didn't like the outcome of the election were very dangerous. If you notice, I noticed that the vice presidential Republican candidate did not say he'd accept the outcome of the election. They haven't even accepted the outcome of the last election. So I'm concerned about what they're going to do.
That is the fake and illegitimate President Joe Biden suggesting that there will be violence involving the supporters of his political opposition, despite the fact that the history of political violence in this country has been almost exclusively on the side Joe Biden represents. But Welker asked Shifty Schiff what he thought about the fake president's comments. He said, what the president said was all too accurate, shockingly, breathtakingly, tragically accurate. And that is, yes, I think the election will be free and fair, but will it be free of violence at the end of the day? And then he, of course, brought up January 6th. He said, this is the legacy of Donald Trump, which is we now cannot go into an election with full confidence that the results will be peaceful. He said he expects Harris to win, but it's still scary close, and said the reason why the margin is so important is because Republicans will challenge the results when they lose. Running up that margin as much as possible and turning people out has to be our priority. And to that I say, good luck with that, commie. If you want to see Elon Musk's comments about this being the last election if Donald Trump loses, by all means, run that score up as high as possible. I'm hoping for a final outcome of 107 million votes for Kamala Harris and 71 million votes for Donald Trump. Show the country that Kamala Harris is about as popular as Barack Obama and Joe Biden combined, and Donald Trump is even less popular than he was in 2020. And let's see if you can find anyone that actually believes that in the entire world. If people want the hose, they're going to get it. You might as well spray them as long and as hard as they need to be sprayed so that we can finally move beyond the point where each and every one of us proudly gives all our power away whenever the television says that we have to, or whenever it reminds us that we already did. The thing is, we already have the mandate and virtually everyone knows it. That's why the pictures and video of Elon Musk jumping for joy at the Trump rally at the site of Assassination Event #1 over this past weekend strike such fear into all their little black commie hearts. What I'm looking forward to is the moment where Donald Trump stands in front of a podium at the top of the Capitol steps 4 years later than he was supposed to and begins that speech with,
as I was saying,
I'll be back tomorrow at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com. And for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.